Hey there! Great to see that you're still with me in this project. Now it's time to build the user's reviews. And so we're just going to continue using and practicing our Flexbox skills in this lecture. And this is what the reviews look like. So each review has this white box here with the text on the top, and then the user image, the name, the date, and the rating of this user. And then also we have like this quote symbol here in the top to make it look a bit better. Okay, and so we're also going to put that here in the end. But for now, let's focus on this review box here. Okay, so let's start with the HTML once more. And it's down here in the user reviews box. So review, and each of these small review boxes will be one review component, okay? So review, and then in there we have the review text. And actually I don't want to use a div element here, but I want to use a figure. So the figure HTML5 element. And actually figures in HTML5 are perfect for reviews. So some people think that figures are only for pictures or for images, but that's not really true. Figures are great for some text and descriptions of the images. And so a figure is perfect here for our review. Okay? Now in here, let's use the block quote element now. Because in fact, the review is like a quote from the person. And so block quote is a perfect HTML5 element for this case. So review text, so I want to call it. And then once again, let's get that text here from our text file. And then paste it here. Okay? And then we have the fig caption, which is called review user. And this is basically the container which will hold the user's image, the name, the date, and the rating, right? So first the image called review photo. And this is the user 1 right now. So user 1. So the image, and now we need a box which is then going to hold the name and the date. Okay, so just a div review user box is what I'm calling this one. Okay, so this box basically is like a box here like this, which holds then the name and the date. Okay, so I'm going to put these two in paragraphs. Review username, and the first one is called Nick Smith. And then review user date, February 23rd, 2017. All right, and then finally we have the rating. And this guy gave 7.8 out of 10, so a pretty good hotel apparently. Okay, and that's it for the review. So again, we have the text, then we have the user containing the photo, the name, and the date, and then we have the rating as well. All right, so that is one review, and then we have another one. So let's get the text for that one, and we can now close it. From Mary Thomas. Now I'm going to use this shortcut here again for expanding the selection. September 13th, 2017. And the rating she gave was 9.3. Okay, so that is our markup. Let's take a look at that. Actually, we forgot to change the image here. So this one is user 2. Okay, so that's better. So let's now go to our components here and then start styling all of that. So reviews. Now first of all, let's get rid here, of course, of this background color. And now the review. Once more, I'm going to start by putting all of the selectors here. So the text, the review user, then the review photo, and let's see what else we have. So text, user, photo, and then we have the user box, username, user date, and rating. So user box, username, user date, and finally the rating. So let's start here with the review. Give it a background color of white. And we also wanted to have the box shadow like the other box. And so remember that we already declared a variable for that, and that one is called shadow light. We wanted to have a padding of 3 rem and a margin at the bottom of 3 rem. Or let's put 3.5 actually, so to give it more breathing space here. Okay, so that should look pretty good already, right? Now let's just make this image here smaller and round already, so that it doesn't occupy so much space. And I want a height and a width of 4.5 rem. And of course make them round, right? Now as for the font size, let's actually define it on the parent element so that all of these text here can then inherit that, right? So let's set that to 14 pixels, and we can do that here in the user reviews. So font size 1.4, and instead of having it here in both the description and the user reviews, we can actually put it on the parent of both of these, and that is here the detail. Okay, so now we say that the detail container should have 1.4 font size, and then all the elements in both the description and the user reviews are going to inherit that. Okay, so let's actually check that out. And yep, so here we go. Now, next up, we should format all of this content here, right? So we want it to look like this. And now I think it's time for a small challenge for you. So I want you to pause the video and try to format this on yourself. Okay, so of course you're going to use Flexbox, but I want you to try it out for yourself, to use these properties and use everything you learned so far to format this content to look like we have it here. Okay, so that shouldn't be all too difficult. So please pause the video right now and I'll be waiting for you. All right, did you manage to get that to work? Well, I'm going to give you the solution right now. So let's see if you did it the same way as I did. So first of all, what should be our Flex container? And of course, that's the user element, right? So the review user. So display flex, and then since we're here, we can already align the items vertically. Okay, so align items center. So that will already make a huge difference. Okay, now let's just give this this paragraph here some margin to the bottom. So margin bottom to rem. So that's better. Now the next step is to just basically push this part here, so the rating, all the way to the right side. Okay, so how did you manage to do that? Well, I hope it was with margin auto. Okay, so just like this. Margin, and actually margin right, set to auto. Because remember that the user box is exactly that. So user box is the element containing both the name and the date. So we want the image, then we want the user box, and then we want that space so that the rating is pushed all the way to the right side. And so on user box, we set margin right to auto. Okay, and so that's exactly what we want here. So just a little bit of Flexbox, and that's already enough to make everything look like this. Now all we need is some margin to the right of this image here, and then a little formatting here on the text, but that shouldn't be all too hard as well. So photo, just a small margin to the right, like 1.5 rem. And now the username, we wanted to have a font size of 1.1 rem and a font weight of 600 in order to make it bold. All right. Also the text transform should be to uppercase and a small margin to the bottom. just like 4 pixels. Then the user date, font size of 1 rem, so 10 pixels, and a slightly lighter color. So color gray, dark 3. And finally the rating. So remember that this one has our pink color. A bigger font size, so 2.2 rem for example, and then a smaller font, white of course, to compensate that. Okay, and that should be really good already, and yeah, it is. So that looks pretty great, I think, right? And so we're already almost done here. Actually, let me just show you what's missing here, and that is this quotation mark here, right? So this big, huge quotation mark. And actually, we will do this with a before pseudo element. So not being in the HTML, but just in the CSS. All right, so we make a pseudo element here before the review. So we can put it here right at the end. And before. So this will just create a small element. And now the content that we want here is not empty, but instead we wanted to have that quotation mark. And so in here, we now have to use one of these special symbols like an HTML entity. Okay, now it works slightly different in CSS, but let me show that to you. So let's look for a table of these HTML entities. And the one I like is from CSS Tricks. So let me see if I find it here somewhere. Let me put it here actually. And so probably it's this one here. Yeah, exactly. So this one here is the one that I have on my reference page. Okay, so if you want the link to that one, you can just check out my reference page at jonas.io, right? So down here somewhere we have the quotation mark. Well, where is it? Now we have the Greek symbols. So you see there's a lot of symbols available. And here, so actually this here is the one that we want, all right? And so you see that in HTML we use it like this here. So this code, or of course this here. So left double quotation mark, which is the name of the symbol. Now in CSS we do it slightly different, as I was saying, because we use this ISO number, okay? And the ISO number for this is this one. So all we have to do is to copy this number here to get this symbol, right? So we can now close this actually, or I'm just going to leave it open. And yeah, here we go. So let's take a look at that in our markup actually. And so yeah, here we go. So it's already there. Now, of course, it shouldn't look like this. So we have to do some changes to that, obviously. So we're going to position this one with absolute positioning right in the corner of the element. So position absolute, and then never forget to define the position on the parent as well. So position relative here. Then from the top, let's move it like 2 rem up, and to the right, let's move it 1 rem to the left side. Okay, so in a negative direction. We're going to play around with that later to position it in the correct position, but for now, let's leave it at that. Then we should also increase the font size because it was really small. So like 20 rem. And it should have a lighter color. So color, gray, light 2. And let's see how it looks like right now. Oh, so it's right here now. So something is not really right. Let's just inspect this element. All right, whoa, what's going on here? So you see that it's huge, okay, first of all, and that's because of the line height of this element. So we should really set it to like 1 or 0. And then also the problem is that I set it here from the right, and it should of course be on the left side, okay? Plus, you can see that this is not really looking the way we want. And so, first of all, let's change that. So the font family. And let's just set it to a sans serif font. Because right now it's inheriting our open sans font, but that doesn't really look so great. So let's just use the default sans serif font on the browser. Now next up, as I was saying, let's decrease the line height here to 1. And then here, of course, it should be left and not right. Okay, so that's already looking much better. Let's take a look at this one. And actually it should be a bit more up. Okay, so let's do that. So top, let's say like 0.75 and see if it moves up a bit like that. All right, and it does. And now just two small problems. You see that it's overflowing the box here, first of all. So it's moving outside of the box. And we of course don't want that. And the second problem is that it's also on top of this text. And so we can fix that with a z-index, right? So let's first of all set a smaller z-index on this one. So 1, and then on the text a higher z-index. Z-index of 10. And never forget that z-index only works if you set the position. Okay, no matter what it is, you have to set the position. And so we're simply using relative here. Now about the overflowing part, that's also very easy to fix. So we did that before a couple of times. All we have to do is set overflow to hidden. And so now these two problems should be fixed. And here we go. Now it works. It's no longer overflowing and the text is on top of the icon, so of this small symbol. Okay, and so it looks great. All that's missing now really is this button here with this hover effect, right? So you have like the small effect where as soon as you hover it, it creates a small space between the show all and this arrow here, right? So let's go do that and add that small button to our HTML. And actually we already coded up that button, so it shouldn't be a lot of work. Now where do we put this one? So figure, yeah, so here after this figure. So button, and then remember that we called it button inline. Show all, and now that small arrow that I showed you, and this one should be inside of a span element, and that's simply because we then want to have that small animation effect that I showed you where the text moves away from the arrow. So the HTML symbol for that arrow is air and then R, so right arrow. So let's check that one out. And so here we go. Now all we have to do is to of course center it, but let's leave that for a bit later. And so what we want to focus on now is that like that hover effect, okay? So let's go back to our components and to that button, which is here, and then code it up. So we basically have a span in there, and all that this span needs is just a small margin to the left side. So like 3 pixels, for example. Okay, and then as soon as we hover the element, so hover and then span, and actually we could put it here in this one, right? So when this one is hovered here, then the span that is in there should increase its margin left to, let's say, 8 pixels. And so now again, since these are like really small numbers, I'm just using pixels here and not really focusing on rem. Now all we have to do is animate this. So transition, all 0.2 seconds, and that's it. We should now be good to go. So let's try that out. And yeah, it's happening. Now what's not working 100% here is changing the color when we hover, right? So first the animation happens where it moves, and only then the color of the span changes, right? So take a look at that. So that's a bit weird. So let's take a look at what's going on here. Maybe we should just change this all here to margin left. Okay. Because we already have this all up here. And so maybe that's making this weird behavior happening. And yeah, it's better now. Now all we have left to do is to center this button here in this container, right? So how could we do that? Well, the easiest way would probably be to just set text align to center on the container, right? So let me show that to you and show you why this is not really where we want to go. So text align, center. And so the button is centered, but so is all of this text here. right? Because this property is inherited by all of these elements, and so now all of them have their text centered. So that's not really the best solution. So why not use Flexbox to center this element here? We have a great property that centers stuff along the cross-axis, right? And that's align items. So all we have to do is to set the container to flex, then change the direction, and then use align items and set it to center. And then it's going to center this button here horizontally, right? So let's do that. So display, flex, and now we have to change the direction, of course, because if we didn't, then it would look like this. So that's not what we want at all. So we want it to be one after the other. So flex direction, column. And so that's what we want, right? And so now they're one after another once again. Now what you see happening here is that this element has this huge border here at the bottom, going from one side to the other. And I want you to think about why that happens, okay? So can you tell why this is happening? Well, this is something that actually has been happening all the time. And it's the fact that the align items property is set to stretch. Because remember that right now, this is the main axis going from top to bottom, and this here is the cross axis, okay? And so that's where the align items property is applying. And since its default is to stretch, this button here is not stretching all the way from this side to this side. So let's actually take a look at that. And here you go. So now it spans from the left side to the right side because of align items set to stretch. And so that's why this is happening. And so let's change it to center. So align items, center. And so that's exactly what we want. So now it's nicely centered, once again with the power of Flexbox. Okay, you see that this focused animation is also happening, just the way it was happening up here as well, right? And so now, if we compare it to our original, it looks just the same. And so, once again, we are done with this video. So great job once again. So we are almost finished here. All that's left to do is to create this small tiny section down here, okay, with this really cool button. So if you're curious about how we do this hover effect here, well, then just join me right now in the next lecture.